Okay, well, this sort of came out of nowhere. Many of you may have heard by now, Sony Interactive Entertainment is getting a new CEO. Jim Ryan is retiring. He's stepping down from his position as CEO of SIE, as reported here by Jason Schreier. Breaking: PlayStation boss Jim Ryan is stepping down. Two sources tell Bloomberg News. So this was before the news became official. This was back in September 27th, 2023. Not long after a whole article was published where it was confirmed through a statement that Jim Ryan put out there that this is indeed happening. And you will notice that if you scroll down through the replies that Jason Schreier has received, people are quite overjoyed about this news. So right here, for example, one of the most liked tweets here reads, "Yes, oh my God." And here's somebody else just posting a GIF of celebration. And scrolling further down, we have more tweets that just say, "This is awesome. This is a great development. It's time, boys." We got folks posting, typical Phil Spencer gifts that one would expect from this. Though speaking of Phil Spencer, despite his recent headbutting with Jim Ryan from the whole Activision Blizzard acquisition situation where Jim Ryan heavily lobbied against Xbox doing this, Phil Spencer, as always, he's a class act, tweeting out, "Jim Ryan has been a great contributor to our industry and a fierce leader for PlayStation. I wish him the best in what he does next. Thank you for all you've done for the community." And yeah, this is kind of the vibe that we can expect off of these responses. Let's frickin' go. PlayStation can have fun again. And here's one tweet where people reminisce about the days when Jack Tretton and Sean Layden were CEO, who are among the more beloved folks, not only because of their forward-facing personality, but also because they had less of an air of like strictly businessmen, but also an air of like, we also do give a shit about gaming and we celebrate it. And it's not just a means for the business's profit. We do care about the medium itself. They always like evoke that vibe. And so, it just made them seem more trustworthy. But beyond that, Jim Ryan, while he was successful business-wise in the way he launched or oversaw the launch of PlayStation 5 and the launch of a number of successful games, there were a few other things he's said or a few moves he's made that has left fans just scratching their heads. So let's take a look at Jason Schreier's article itself, published on September 27th, 2023. PlayStation boss Jim Ryan is retiring from Sony in March. He joined Sony all the way back in 1994 and was appointed as CEO in 2019. So one thing there's no question about is that he was definitely an OG. He joined the company right before the first PlayStation console was introduced. It was literally there since the beginning. And the statement that he put out can be found on gamesindustry.biz. He said, "After 30 years, I've made the decision to retire from SIE in March of 2024. I've relished the opportunity to have a job I love in a very special company working with great people and incredible partners, but I found it increasingly difficult to reconcile living in Europe and working in North America." Apparently, that was the main issue why he's moving on, because of this conflict between where he lives and where he works. And then beyond that, you've got CEO of Sony Group, Kenichiro Yoshida, who said that Jim Ryan has been an inspirational leader throughout his entire period with us, but never more so than in overseeing the launch of PlayStation 5 in the midst of the global COVID pandemic. That extraordinary achievement made by the entire SIE team has been steadily built on, and PlayStation 5 is on track to become SIE's most successful console yet. So on that front, yes, he was successful. He did oversee the company, or SIE, successfully. And while his retirement is in process, and as they try to look for a new CEO, Hiroki Totoki, president and chief financial officer of parent Sony Group Corporation, will become interim CEO of the games business when Ryan leaves, before they find a successor. As for the areas where Jim Ryan fumbled, well, the most recent situation was how hard he went against Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard for $69 billion, lobbying against the deal with federal regulators. It led to a whole case with the FTC where a lot of things from each company's respective closets were unearthed. Some stuff was leaked, but ultimately Jim Ryan failed to prevent this deal. It is at this point happening one way or another, and it just the level to which he pursued this was pretty crazy. But then again, when you look at just how much money Sony and SIE make from Activision Blizzard games, they feared that if we saw Call of Duty become Xbox exclusive, then that's hundreds of millions of dollars every year that we might end up losing and things like that. But ultimately, the arguments that Jim Ryan made were rather hypocritical, talking about how anti-competitive this all is when Jim Ryan is constantly, just Sony Interactive Entertainment in general, is constantly pursuing exclusivity deals that prevent games from coming out on other consoles, among many other just arguments that didn't really convince the masses. This is one area where Jim Ryan just, he spent a lot of time on it. Nothing came out of this. And I wonder if this was in any way a contributor to his sudden retirement, or if this is just coincidental timing. And then beyond that, Jason Schreier has compiled some of the issues that people have had with Jim Ryan, in terms of the community's perspective. Jason Schreier tweeted this on September 29th, 2023, just 2 days after it was officially announced that Jim Ryan would be retiring from Sony Interactive Entertainment. When I broke the news of PlayStation boss Jim Ryan's departure this week, I was kind of surprised to see a ton of gamers responding with cheers and celebratory gifts. And then embedded on this tweet is a link to an article titled "Why PlayStation Fans Are Cheering CEO's Departure." I'm actually not surprised at all, and I don't think a lot of people are either. I don't think it's any secret that Jim Ryan was never among the more liked CEOs that Sony's had. Some folks responded by saying things like, "I applauded the departure. He was a champion for investors, not consumers," expressing that he believes that his predecessors understood straddling the line between business and the consumer better. A number of users have come out to say that Jim Ryan always came off as tone deaf when it comes to communicating with the gaming community and the like. It doesn't help that Jim Ryan wasn't as personable as some of the other CEOs. Here's somebody saying that I think a lot of people, not all, like having a more personable person at the front, like Phil, Reggie, Sean, etc. And then others have pointed to some of the less than ideal business tactics that Sony has engaged in recently, like raising the prices on PlayStation Plus significantly. I actually covered this about a month ago. I made a video titled "PlayStation Plus 35% price increase baffles and upsets the internet." A 35% increase is just unprecedented. It's usually in the 10% ballpark. And it's especially baffling when, for such a huge increase, the service offers nothing additional in return. A number of people have also pointed out how during Jim Ryan's tenure, they closed down Japan's studio, which, while wasn't the most profitable division of PlayStation, people would have loved to see the company just nurture that more rather than just shun it and shut it down entirely. And then Jason Schreier himself, in his article titled "Why PlayStation Fans Are Cheering CEO's Departure," he also did point out some of the most common criticisms that he saw from the gaming community. He highlighted how, in contrast to previous faces of PlayStation, such as the serene Sean Layden and the video game-loving Shuhei Yoshida, Ryan came off to many fans as slick corporate businessman. And then he highlighted one situation where Jim Ryan straight up dismissed retro games and their preservation by saying that old PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games looked ancient, like why would anybody play this, linking to a VG247 article published back in June of 2017 that archived Jim Ryan saying this. Here's the exact quote: "When we've dabbled with backwards compatibility, I can say it is one of those features that is much requested but not actually used much. That, and I was at a Gran Turismo event recently where they had PS1, PS2, PS3, and PS4 games, and the PS1 and the PS2 games, they looked ancient. Like, why would anybody play this?" VG247 also highlighted the irony of Ryan saying something like that when you consider that Sony's selling those very same old games on PlayStation 4 after slightly putting them up and adding in trophies. Why bother with bringing retro games to modern consoles at all if, as Jim Ryan says, they're ancient and nobody wants to play them? The company clearly seems to recognize that there is enough of a demand for retro games that it's worthwhile bringing them on modern consoles. If you make the purchase of retro games more convenient by making them easy to purchase or transfer over to the most modern hardware and the most recent generation of consoles, then guess what? People will be curious to check them out. Not to mention that it is my belief that games should be preserved. It's crazy to see how many games that were digital only are dying off and how many games have not been brought into the modern era and are close to becoming extinct. Another dumb thing that Jim Ryan said while touting the company's accomplishments in Europe and Asia was that people had never played games before PlayStation in the Middle East, which somebody who is from the Middle East immediately pointed out that this is false. Mate, we had net cafes and arcades and NES ROM hacks same time as the West did. We just brought cracked games and polystations because you wouldn't sell to us. And then there's the whole situation where Jim Ryan made a public statement after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. v. Wade rather than take a stance on abortion rights, as some staff had hoped. He said that, everyone can have their opinions, which many employees at PlayStation felt that was really tone deaf, and a lot of people within Sony were dismayed by Jim Ryan's responses. So studios like Insomniac Games, makers of Marvel Spider-Man and the upcoming Marvel Spider-Man 2, decided to donate $50,000 to women's rights organization, but were forbidden from speaking publicly about it. Most prominently affecting the potential future of Sony Interactive Entertainment is the way Jim Ryan has overseen a PlayStation shift toward games as a service, which has forced a lot of those studios that are more accustomed to making single-player, campaign-driven, story-heavy experiences develop their own live services like Naughty Dog and Insomniac, as well as Guerrilla, who are all working or been working on multiplayer service games with mixed levels of success. As Jason Schreier reports here, some have been canceled or overhauled, such as an online game based on The Last of Us, that big multiplayer Last of Us game that has been announced. That project has been in trouble. Bungie actually checked it out. Bungie has been acquired by PlayStation under Jim Ryan's watch, and apparently it was not living up to Bungie standards of what a live service should be. So I'm not sure if it's scrapped or they're just going back to the drawing board, but that project has definitely been delayed internally. But yeah, all of these studios, Naughty Dog, Insomniac, Guerrilla, they specialize in single-player experiences, and that pivot to making live services is not going to be an easy one. It's going to take a while, just like how it took Bungie a while to get their bearings with the Destiny live service. And there are examples of game studios who specialized in single-player experiences trying to make live services and trying to make them as ambitious as something like Destiny, just failing with disastrous results. As Jason Schreier points out here, just ask the developers of Anthem, BioWare, who tried to make this shift and tried to make their own Destiny and tried to kind of reach that level from the outset. And I mean, that just failed miserably because not only was the development surrounding this game completely troubled and the tool sets and the engine just not suited for Anthem, but the lack of experience also definitely came into play, and it led to that disastrous launch. And that's a big part of why Sony decided to acquire Destiny maker Bungie under Ryan's leadership, but even Bungie's expertise has not yet been able to turn PlayStation Studios into a service game factory. Again, it's going to take a while for that to happen. Now, I'm not sure if Jim Ryan is directly responsible for Sony steering the ship towards more live services, like was this his proposition, or did he happen to become CEO during a time when the higher-ups already had plans to shift the company more towards live services? Either way, with all this happening during Jim Ryan's tenure, a lot of fans associate Sony's attempted shift towards more live services to Jim Ryan's leadership. And it's not just fans who are worried. Insiders apparently are worried about the company's lack of coherent vision, seemingly misplaced bets on service games, niche VR headsets, and a baffling machine called the PlayStation Portal, a $200 remote play only device that can stream games off of your PlayStation 5 that doesn't come with Bluetooth. So if you want to get wireless audio off of it, you have to buy PlayStation's earbuds or headset, which are $150 to $200. Just a baffling product line all around. And then as far as the misplaced bets on service games go, Jason Schreier highlights here that even Fortnite is making less money than it once did. And not to mention that there are only so many live services that can occupy the gaming space because people don't have an unlimited amount of time, and live services expect an unlimited amount of time out of people. Whereas with experiences that have a beginning, middle, and end, people will hop from one to the other. With live services, there's only one or two that people can reasonably stick to, and the market is becoming oversaturated, and PlayStation's working on multiple live services that expect people to invest into over the long term. And it's just like, how is that sustainable to have so many live services come out at once? But anyway, that's a discussion for another day. The bottom line is that Jim Ryan's departure is being celebrated by fans, by the gaming community. Now, there are those who have said, now, News outlet Games Industry did release an opinion piece titled Sony has a crucial decision to make after Jim Ryan's retirement, where they noted that they did speak to people from within PlayStation, people internally, and apparently the folks that they've spoken to were clearly fond of Jim Ryan. He was Uncle Jim to some in the UK office. Andrew House once described him as PlayStation's secret weapon, and he was called a hero by former PlayStation executive Shahid Ahmed in a keynote talk back in April. And I don't want to give the impression that he achieved absolutely nothing. He did lead the PlayStation 5 launch through a pandemic. Like, that is an impressive thing to have on your resume. But from the gaming community's perspective, looking long term, many just didn't like where Jim Ryan's leadership and how he was steering the company, whether by his own will or from the mandate of higher ups, how all of that was going and how that would culminate in what many fans were perceiving as a potentially worse, more corporate PlayStation, whose business tactics might just diminish what PlayStation fans love about the brand and, you know, what they specialize in. But now the future of PlayStation will be defined by who is chosen next, and that, indeed, I agree, will be a crucial decision. In the meantime, though, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Jim Ryan's retirement from Sony Interactive Entertainment, and what you think the future holds for PlayStation. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.